New Thought Media Network. We are a global broadcast network of positive music, media, and entertainment, inspiring humanity's evolution along the journey of enlightenment and creating a world of love, peace, empowerment, and prosperity for all. New Thought Media Network. Positively inspiring.
Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and welcome to the Inclusive Church, ideas and resources for multicultural ministries. I'm the author of Stained Glass Spirit, Becoming a Spiritual Community Where Oneness Does Not Require Sameness, and the host for this ongoing conversation about what it means to be inclusive, what it requires of us to be inclusive, and how we can expand our commitment to being inclusive within our spiritual communities. So just in case this is your first time seeing or experiencing the Inclusive Church, two quick caveats or disclaimers or inoculations, depending on how you want to think about it. One, I'm using church purposefully to reclaim church as referring to the collection of people who come together to study, teach, practice any particular spiritual or religious belief. In other words, I'm really committed to breaking the stereotype or the automatic default perception that church is about a building. So we're talking about the people, not the property. And then second, you'll hear me say leaders in spiritual communities, or as a leader, we must hold ourselves accountable for. And when I'm using the word leader, I'm not only talking about ministers. I'm talking about all of the people who are leading, who are running programs, who are coordinating teams, who are donating money to support specific activities. All of that requires leadership or translates into leadership. And so this show is all about connecting to the things that people who are in leadership roles, what they can do and what they should do. So today, what are we talking about today? Today we are talking about the importance of learning together. The importance of learning together. The importance of creating intentional opportunities to learn together, and why that's important, and some ideas for how you can easily or consistently do that in support of your commitment to being inclusive. And since I do not have a featured guest today, then we'll be really looking at this as a toolkit Tuesday, and I'll be targeting about that 30-minute mark, unlike when I have a featured guest. And we generally go 55 minutes, 50 to 55 minutes, and use the full hour. So we're going to stay focused today. We're going to really dive into what does it mean to learn together, and why is this a tactic that is important in an important part of your strategy for being inclusive. So um, I do have some target outcomes, even though we're only going to spend 25 minutes or so together on this. I do want there to be some understanding of the importance of learning together. Like, why is that important? And I want to make sure that you have some specific tactics that you can consider using or sharing in order to create this opportunity to learn together and to grow together and to expand or deepen the commitment to being inclusive. So let's first talk about the why. Do I want to talk about the why? No. I want to talk about the what. What is it that makes this important? What does it mean to learn together? And why is Tracy talking about it? So basically, if I put it in a couple of sentences, what I'm suggesting is that we make a conscious and intentional commitment to educate ourselves individually, to educate each other, share the information that we know, and of course, to educate collectively our spiritual community, and to do that through group processes and experiences. I can make a commitment to educate myself, and I can go do any number of things and then just keep that information to myself, or use that information for my own individual purposes. But the why this is important, this idea of learning together, at least from my perspective, why this is important is because often what happens is we sometimes joke about, oh, that person thinks they're the diversity cop, right? Or that person really was kind of harsh in their correcting, person B. And in our spiritual communities, that happens because we're a microcosm of the macrocosm, and that's what happens just in the world in general. So, this commitment to learning together is really important because more often than not, members of our spiritual communities have been socialized by their experience at home, at work, at school, in the world. They've been socialized like to judge people who know less than they do, or to put themselves on a higher pedestal because they think or they believe they know more than the next person. And that happens around any topic, every topic, including in our spiritual communities, who we think has been studying our faith system longer, or who we think has a better grasp on it or a lesser grasp on it. So we're human, and that sense of judgment or creating a false hierarchy is something that we've been socialized to do. So we have to be very intentional and deliberate when we decide we want to create something different. And so it's important, I think, for us to recognize in these topics about being inclusive that a lot of what you know is dependent on how much exposure you have had to people who are different from yourself. And many people in our spiritual communities and churches have had very limited exposure to people who are different from themselves by race or by age or by ethnicity or by the language spoken, right? Or by physical ability or disability. If there's not somebody in their immediate family, or if there's not someone they've known either as a neighbor or a coworker for a long, long time, many people tend to have only been exposed to people they share more in common with than not. And so we want to learn together so that we expand our exposure to different kinds of people and people from different identity groups. So, built into this why is also this piece of when we learn together. So, let's say that I am uh, in go to a class with 5 other people I know. I learn something that applies to me. It expands my knowledge. And I take in all that's going on from my own personal perspective. But if I go to this class or this event or this conference with 5 other people I know, and then we're sharing what we got from that workshop, or we're comparing notes about what we learned from that event. What happens is, yeah, I have my insights, but when I hear your insights, most of the time I'll be like, oh, I I never would have thought of that. Or, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't even catch that because I was focused on something that attracted my attention. And so that's another why we could send people off to do things individually. And we want to encourage that for people who have interest in time and just the affinity to do their own research study. That's great. But that is not the same as having a strategy or a series of tactics that are focused on really having a group experience. We will see something, we all will learn something or see something different. So, since it is a Toolkit Tuesday, I just want to share a few ways that you could do this so that you can. I'm really just trying to um, jumpstart your thinking. You could brainstorm with the people in your church to determine what things would be perfect for you. But I'm going to jumpstart you with a few ideas of things that you could do that would create an environment where you are learning together. And if you have some specific ideas that you want to share, please, please put them in the chat or the comment section, depending on which platform you are on. And then I'll be able to bring those in as well. So, one of the things that you could do if you live in a city that has a Holocaust museum, then you could visit the Holocaust Museum in your local community together. And that's not just to learn about the Holocaust, it's also to talk about the scenario that led up to it, what happened after. And what I've been surprised by is how many people actually don't, they may know the general outcome of the Holocaust, but they don't know a lot of the details about what happened because it's just kind of been swept under the rug, or they thought it did not um, apply to them or mean anything to them because they were not of Jewish or German descent. and thought, oh, that, well, I'm not Jewish and I'm not German, and so what difference does it make? And that, right, leaves out a lot of other groups that were impacted by and a part of what happened during the Holocaust. And then you want to be able to use that visit to have an experience and to have a conversation about, one, what if this were happening today? What do our spiritual belief systems and values, what would we do? Two, you want to be able to have a conversation about how this experience of the Holocaust has come through generation to generation to generation, and how it might be affecting people who either are in your spiritual community now or who are in the community, the city, town, village where your community is. And is there something that is important for your community to understand or to do? So the Holocaust museums that I have been to really open a great conversation about people being treated differently and how to be inclusive, and what does inclusion really mean, and what does it mean when you decide to create a human hierarchy and eliminate part of humanity. So that's one thing that I would ask you to consider if there is a Holocaust museum in your local community. Another thing that you could think about is starting a book club or a book discussion group, and then selecting topics that are related to being inclusive and integrating your spiritual, physical, mental, financial priorities with the way that you are demonstrating and teaching and practicing the spiritual beliefs that are a part of your tradition and your belief system. So starting a book club or a book discussion group, when you do that, then you have a group of people who are committed to, maybe it's once a month or maybe it's once every 2 months that you change the books, and then you are having people read the same book and talk about it together. So you're building a wider platform of people who are sharing really key and important information. Idea number three, go to a class or a workshop together. And that, when I first wrote those words, I was thinking, oh, find something at your local community college, or maybe there is a community organization that is offering a workshop on communication skills, and you want to go as a group and then talk about the cultural impact on communication there. So that's what I was thinking about at first, and then I realized, yeah, but I've been a member or a participant in so many online classes, and the ones that um, I knew other people who were also participating online. Then the next day, two or three of us would get on Zoom or come together in person and spend 30 or 40 minutes sharing our perspectives and talking about how that would work or how that does work in our own lives. So I really think it could be in person or digital, right? Or, via any online platform. The point is to plan it so that people from your spiritual community are going together, know that they are going together, and plan a time to discuss it. Because if you don't plan that time to discuss it, then it's almost like everybody had their own individual experience. So you can go to a class together and then, go have lunch afterwards, or you can go to a class together online, and the following Sunday, after your regular service, you plan to talk about it together. There are lots of ways to handle the logistics of that, but that's the foundational idea. Another idea for you is to develop an in-house workshop or class series. So if you have people in your community who represent different identity groups, you could pull them together. And let's say you want to, I don't know, let's say you want to do a month-long series on cross-cultural conflict. Well, you could have, 4 or 8, like 2 people per week from your community focus on a specific topic. And how does this identity group generally, what are the norms for this group related to identifying and resolving conflict? And give really real life examples of conflict, and what are some examples of how conflict has shown up and what makes it challenging when you have people from different groups coming together. A community that I've been a member of, we put together a 6 session series on facing racism, because it was a topic as our community, as our church was growing, and there were people from different racial and ethnic groups on an increasing basis. It became really important for our leadership to understand different perspectives and to know some of the history and background for different racial and ethnic identity groups. And so we internally put that together and then shared it, and then shared it again about a year and a half later with a new group of people. But it was developed in house. We didn't find anything like what we were imagining out there, and so we created it ourselves. And you could do that, and it could be just a 1 day thing, or it could be a series that is based on an important theme. Now, you may not want to create a full book club, but maybe you want to choose a monthly theme, or a book of the month. And if you do that, then you could use that book and share excerpts from it in your weekly programming, online or in person. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Saturday service or a Sunday service that you provide information for from the book. You could say, this is our book of the month, and then plan to have a conversation with a different person every week, just a 20 to 30-minute conversation about highlights from the book and how the book is impacting them, and what your spiritual practices and principles teach that are in alignment with this book. And you could do that as, a web-based, an internet-based series that you post, or it could be an article in the newsletter. So people who are reading the book get highlights, but people who are not reading the book may be inspired to join in reading the book. So there are lots of things you could do, but if you have a book of the month and it relates to a monthly theme you're using, that's a really good way to encourage learning together, because there is a focus point. And it is a focus point that often will eliminate this sense of, well, this person's an expert, or this person knows more, or I don't want to say much because I don't think I'm not an expert and I don't know anything about that. If you're talking about what did the author say in chapters 3 and 4 that really touched you, or what came up in chapter 6, here are the 3 points in chapter 6. How does that relate to you? So there's no right or wrong answer, but in the process, everyone is learning more about whatever is in the book related to being inclusive or understanding more about people who are from a different identity group than your own. I think I might have one or two more. Let's see. Yes. You can invite a series of guest speakers. And again, this might be if your church has Sunday services still, it might be that you do that. I don't know, the third Sunday of every month, we have a guest speaker who is talking about something related to inclusion or something that is related to diversity in humanity and what we should know about that. Um, it could be that you decide you're going to take 1 month and have guest speakers for 4 weeks or 5 weeks in a row. But let's say you're part of a ministry in a church that doesn't have Sunday services. Maybe you have a virtual ministry, or you have a focus ministry that is focused on some aspect, but you don't have church services on a weekly basis. And so you could invite a series of guest speakers on a particular topic or theme, and that would be your programming for a month or for a quarter or for, whatever schedule makes sense for you. The key, again, is thinking, how can I ensure that the people in my spiritual community, the people who are part of my church, are getting education on a regular basis, and it shows our intention to be committed to inclusion. So, a few reminders as you dive into this and we go into our last 5 minutes. It's really, really important for you to remember that if you do choose something that is reading, like a book club, that you take into consideration different literacy levels, different comprehension levels, different fluency levels. If you have a number of people in your church for whom English is not their first language. So how will you handle translation? How will you handle the level of writing that's in the book you choose or the books you choose? And I am surprised by how many people I know actually are very quick to say they do not buy books, like hard copy books. They do not, the physical book, that they don't buy the physical book. Even when it's I still turn to prayer. But they don't buy books, but they, will buy them digitally, that they will read books on their computer or on their Kindle or on their, tablet. And so keep that in mind as well. And then in terms of planning activities or events where people need to come in person, really don't forget to consider physical accessibility, mobility. Do people need different kinds of mobility in order to reach your classrooms or in order to participate in whatever it is you are planning? I recently did an activity or facilitated a process, and I asked everybody to stand up. And I laughed at myself because I've pretty much trained myself to say, if you are able, please stand up. And I didn't think about it, but that's what came out of my mouth. What I thought about was, okay, I want people to stand up. That's what I was thinking. And without pre-planning or reading notes, what came out of my mouth was, if you are able to, or if you are comfortable standing, please stand. And so that accessibility, mobility, and endurance, if you have people stand, for example, how long are they going to have to stand? Think about the people in your church when you are making those decisions. And then also remember that inclusion, when we're talking about creating inclusive communities, inclusion is not only about race and ethnicity. And so it's important to be able to have conversation about race and ethnicity and different circumstances that are the result of race-based hatred or race-based stereotypes. But you also want to be sure that you include other topics, whether that is LGBTQ plus or gender identity, whether it is physical abilities and disabilities. Choose the topics that align with your vision, mission, and purpose, and include a variety of people in your planning so that you make sure any blind spots you have about whom people might need to know more about are actually a part of your strategy. Now, if you can do all of this, then you have a really good chance of building a community, a church where people are happy to learn together, where people begin to realize that they can learn from each other, not just 3 or 4 people who are the experts and who are supposed to know everything, and we'll just go to them and have them tell us what we need to know. It'll be much more productive, and especially if you want to create a long-term legacy of a spiritual community where oneness does not require sameness, then you'll want to be able to learn together. My name is Tracy Brown. This is the Inclusive Church. I want to encourage you to join me every week, every Tuesday at noon Mountain Time, and especially during the month of September 2025, we're going to be learning together and doing a book discussion on the book Finding Refuge, Heart Work for Healing Collective Grief. And every week I will have people with me, and we'll be talking about the different chapters. And maybe this will be one of the books you want to take back to your church and talk about later in the year or early next year. So that's it for this week. Think about how you can use learning together as a part of your strategy. And I'll see you again soon.
Thanks for watching The Inclusive Church with Tracy Brown. Join us again next week at 12 noon Mountain Time.
On behalf of everyone at New Thought Media Network, thank you for being a member of our virtual family. Your financial contributions help share the New Thought message with people from around the world. Please visit and contribute at www.ntmedia.org/donate. New Thought Media Network, come be you. And please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, peace and blessings.